The 1980s were a renaissance period for action movies. It predates any notion of political correctness or identity politics. And some of the best action movies ever made are from that era. You have Red Dawn.
Yeah! Yeah!
No, not that one.
You lose.
Yeah, that one. You have Aliens.
There they go over there! Get him! Come on! Get him!
And you have Terminator, which is about as iconic as it gets. Now, I could probably go on for hours talking about the great action films of the 1980s, and that would only cover the Schwarzenegger flicks. So Terminator is an all-time classic for multiple reasons. Great story, decent acting.
Don't make me bust you up, man!
Amazing special effects for 1984, and guns and explosions. One of the more famous firearms used in the film was the AR-18, which finally brings us around to what I'm going to talk about today. The AR-18 is the brainchild of Eugene Stoner, who, after selling the rights of the AR-15 to Colt, decided to take another stab at designing a carbine. The AR-18 is not nearly as refined as the AR-15, relying heavily on stamped sheet metal construction versus the milled or billet construction of its predecessor. But it does have a beautiful simplicity about it. Uses short-stroke gas piston operating system, which is very different from the AR-15, but it employs a similar rotating closed-bolt design. The AR-18 never garnered the commercial success of the AR-15, but it did provide a basis of design that would end up being copied by several modern carbines today. You see elements of it in the Bushmaster ACR, FN SCAR, with the bolt and carrier design. And the ACR even uses almost the exact same piston system. Sig Sauer MCX uses pretty much the same recoil system, and borrowed some elements from the piston design as well. But anyhow, the original fizzled out pretty quick. Now, if you can manage to find an original AR-18, it is likely going to cost more than everything I have ever reviewed on this channel put together. There is a civilian version, the AR-180, which can be found for a little bit more realistic prices, but even those are hard to come by. But that's where Brownell's comes in. Brownell's released the BRN-180 in 2019 as a joint venture with Primary Weapon Systems and FM Products. Originally released as a complete upper receiver package, chambered in 223 Wild, they took the internals of the AR-180 and fitted them into an upper receiver that mates up to any standard AR-15 lower. This required some modifications to the bolted carrier assembly and the recoil assembly, but they were able to maintain the piston dimensions pretty much exact. And since this wasn't meant to be a full-blown clone, they decided to go for broke and added a 1913 rail on the top of the receiver and an M-LOK handguard. So, before we go any further, let's take a step back and go from ass to mouth, because that's how I roll. On the ass end is a Midwest Industries side-folding fixed extruded stock. This is a pretty new product from Midwest Industries and runs about $185. It mates up via a KNS 1913 rail section on the back of the lower, which runs about $50. Since this rifle doesn't use the exact same recoil system of an AR-15, it contains the action all in the upper, and so there's no need for a buffer tube sticking out of the back. I had tried a few of the Sig Sauer stock options on here, but I liked the look of this one when I saw it, and the Sig stocks that are adjustable for length of pull, they're just too damn wobbly to me. I will point out that the stock does maintain the side foldability, and it locks up pretty well. Now moving forward, this thing is actually built on an Anderson lower. again, when I bought this, it was actually an upper receiver, so I just had this extra lower floating around, and I built it up for this purpose. It's a pretty basic and no-frills lower receiver, and I won't venture to remember what it cost me when I bought it, but I reckon that they are a lot more expensive today. I used more than likely a CMMG lower parts kit for all the essential springs and pins, but added in my own fire control group. The safety is a radian with the 45-degree throw, and yes, it is ambidextrous, as if y'all even need to ask. For the trigger, I went with an ALG. It's not exactly a Geisley, but it's the next best thing. The grip is an MOEK. I think I talked about these enough during all my 300 blackout videos. So, if you care about my opinion on them, go check out one of those after this one. And that brings me to the upper, which is the star of the show. Now, I should point out that this is a Gen 1 upper. They have since released a Gen 2 upper, about a month after I bought this one. Pricks.
Bogus.
Which has a few changes that I will touch on. The receiver and the handguard on this upper are both 7075 T6 aluminum. The machining is beautiful. The fit and finish are all top notch. On the back of the receiver, there is a polymer end cap that acts as a recoil buffer, as well as an adapter to mate up with the AR-15 lower. Now on the flip side, they took some time to mill out a little notch that'll be meant for the paddle, and they made it generous just in case you're using one of those big ass oversized paddles for whatever reason. They also added in this little rubber bumper because they anticipated that you'd be using some side folding stock, so they didn't want it to keep it from smacking against the side of the receiver every single time. Now back on the business side, we have a polymer ejection port cover, and just like with your AR-15, it pops open from the action of the bolt. The charging handle that shipped with it was the dogleg style, so it actually came up and angled out. I didn't like that one at all, because once they added in the 1913 rail up here, you were bound to be mounting some kind of optic or something up top. And with the dogleg on the original design, all you had were iron sights, and this was all smooth up here, so you really weren't going to be grinding your knuckles up against anything. But once you added in any type of optic whatsoever, you were smacking your knuckles every time you tried to charge the weapon. Kind of a pain in the ass. Brownell's has been talking about, since they released the uppers, the Gen 1 uppers, they were talking about releasing a side straight out charging handle. Just like this guy. But they have yet to do it. So, I've bought this one off of AR-180parts.com. And I want to throw out some props to those guys too, because I just got this part a few days ago, and I only ordered it 3 days earlier. So, this thing shipped super fast, and it is very high quality. Fits right in there, and it works like a charm. Now before I jump up front, I have an old Aimpoint Patrol optic on this guy, and it's sitting in a LaRue tactical mount. This whole setup has been rattle canned a few times, so it looks worse than it really is, but it's a very practical optic, even if much larger and heavier than what it needs to be for a red dot. But I dig it. The barrel is 16 inches, and it is 4150 carbon steel with a black nitride finish. It is chambered in 223 Wild and has a 1-in-8 twist. Now, start talking about the changes between this one and the Gen 2. And the first change is the mounting solution for the handguard. On the Gen 1, we have this little bracket here, which they call a U-bracket, or I don't know what actually they do call it. Clamps around the barrel directly, and it's held in place by the rods from the recoil assembly. So when I pop them out, take out the bolt carrier, this just slips right out. Those would actually sit just like that in those notches. And then this part here is what actually clamps around the bolt. and ever so slightly some spring tension. Now, I'm not going to attempt to take this handguard off because it actually doesn't fit past this muzzle device.
A few moments later.
Okay, so I undouched my muzzle device for a minute just so I could get the handguard off and then show you what the piston assembly actually looks like. And so this is fully disassembled here, but you have the op rod that goes right over here, and then a couple extra pieces here. Got this little mini plunger, and then this guy here, which fence off the extra gas. Now, the system shipped with this second one, which just has, I don't know, bigger holes or whatever, more holes, looks like. And this one's labeled as being used for suppressed operation. I don't even know if this one says anything on it. No, it don't. So, that's the difference. And couldn't take it apart on camera with one hand because I'm a douchebag. But this little bit fits over top of that guy. This fits over that guy. And then the dingus goes right in there. Just the tip.
We now join our regularly scheduled program, already in progress.
So the Gen 2 uses a single set screw in here in lieu of this whole part. And that helps clamp into, I don't know if it's the trunnion or the barrel directly or whatever the case may be, but that keeps the handguard in place. I don't really seem to care one way or the other. This one works just fine for what I'm using it for. The second major change between the Gen 1 and the Gen 2, though, is on the piston system. On the Gen 2, they've made it so that you can access the gas system and there's a switch there, so you can flip it on the fly. Much better design if you're the kind of person that plans on shooting this gun suppressed. So what are my final thoughts? Well, this is a very nice product. It shoots really smooth, and the action is great. The upgraded charging handle is a big improvement to me, as the old one was just not easy to deal with the optics mounted up there. I haven't done a ton to change this setup, because frankly there isn't a ton to be changed. Would have preferred the new gas piston, but such is life. I also paid a few $100 less, because they definitely increased the price after I got mine. So it was a great value at the time, serving as a budget-friendly version of basically a Sig Sauer MCX. As of now, the Gen 2 16-inch upper goes for about $900 on Brownell's website. That is still just over half of the cost of an MCX Virtus upper assembly from Sig Sauer.
Are you serious?
Which have been unobtainium for months. So, if you are craving the MCX, but don't feel like waiting forever for it to be in stock, and don't feel like paying $1,700 for it, or well over $2,000 if you buy it over on Gunbroker, then this is a great option. I will also say that it is much less front-heavy than other piston uppers that I have had experience with. The ACR and the SIG 516 are both far less balanced than this gun. Part of that is the barrel profile, which is pretty thin, coupled with the lack of any silly quick detach barrel assembly on the ACR, or monstrous gas block on the SIG. So, if that is the compromise I have to make in order to keep the gun weight down, I'm good with that. So yeah, overall I give this upper 2 thumbs way up.
Thumbs way up. This guy's such a douche.
So thank y'all for watching. Be sure to check out Dooshbag's brother Dick using the link in the description. And remember, I don't know who you are out there, but I got a gun.